August 4th, 1985. It was a Sunday in Connecticut. Tom Barrett went to visit a close friend and colleague, Ellen Sherman, as he hadn't been able to reach her by phone earlier. When he arrived at the door, the lights were still on inside, and the air conditioner outside was running, but no one answered. Feeling worried for his friend, Tom circled the house and pried open a window to climb inside. The room was quiet except for the family dog barking incessantly, but Ellen was nowhere to be seen. Tom cautiously headed toward the bedroom, sensing that something was terribly wrong. As he pushed open the bedroom door, Tom froze at the sight of Ellen lying naked and motionless on the bed, her body cold and no longer breathing. Shocked and terrified, Tom shakily dialed the police.
I think Ellen Sherman is dead. Please come quickly. Something is very wrong here.
Upon receiving the report, the police immediately arrived at the scene. The investigators, upon approaching the victim, noticed unusual details and raised serious questions about the cause of Ellen's death. So, what exactly happened? Subscribe to our channel to join us as we uncover the mysteries behind this case. The crime took place in Connecticut, USA, a region known for its peaceful beauty and green forests surrounding residential areas. It's a quiet, safe place where murders are rare. In the small town where Ellen Sherman lived, people were absorbed in their slow-paced lives. Everyone believed that the tree-lined streets and happy homes would never be darkened by the shadow of crime. But the shocking crime shattered the town's peaceful atmosphere, raising countless unanswered questions and turning this place into the focus of public attention. The victim was identified as Ellen Sherman, 38, a gentle, intelligent woman with a warm smile and a caring nature. She worked in human resources at a packaging company in town. Ellen and her husband, Edward Sherman, got married in the early 80s. Initially, their life was harmonious, and they were a couple admired by many. Both had stable careers, lived in a luxurious house in Connecticut, and were often seen together at social gatherings. Edward Sherman, 45, was a charming and successful businessman. Despite his calm appearance, he was known for his extramarital affairs and lived quite freely. Edward often attended parties and went on trips with friends, sometimes leaving his wife alone at home. At the time of the incident, Edward had left home on Friday afternoon, August 2nd, to hang out with 4 close friends. This trip was a chance to relax and have fun after some recent stress. The next morning, Edward suddenly remembered that his yacht might still be running at the dock. Thinking this would be costly or cause damage if left on, he decided to call Ellen to ask her to check, but no one picked up. On August 4th, Edward started to feel uneasy after repeatedly calling home without getting any response from Ellen. That evening, he called a neighbor, Sarah Blake, asking her to check on the house, but Sarah was busy and away. Left with no other choice, Edward called Ellen's colleague, Tom Barrett, asking for his help. Tom agreed to check on the house. When he arrived, he noticed that the lights were on inside, and the air conditioner was still running, a sign that someone was home. However, the front door was locked, and despite ringing the bell multiple times, Tom received no response from inside. Worried about Ellen, he walked around the house trying to look inside through the windows, but the living room windows were fully curtained, making it impossible for him to see anything. His sense of unease growing, Tom decided to break in through a hallway window. As soon as he entered, he heard the family dog barking incessantly and noticed dog feces scattered on the floor, suggesting that no one had cleaned in days. A bad feeling overwhelmed Tom, pushing him toward the bedroom to check. Upon entering, he was hit by a chilling draft and an unpleasant smell. Approaching the bed, Tom froze in horror at the sight of Ellen lying there motionless, completely unclothed. Shocked and terrified, he fled the house and immediately called the police to report the crime. The police quickly arrived and secured the scene. After conducting a thorough inspection of the house, investigators confirmed there were no signs of forced entry. All the windows and doors were intact, except for the hallway window that Tom had pried open to enter. This suggested that the perpetrator might have been someone known to the victim or had used a plausible reason, like plumbing repairs, to be invited into the house. Ellen's body lay cold on the bed. Tragically, she was visibly pregnant at the time, her belly noticeably large. There were 3 ligature marks on her neck, two of which were deep, indicating strong force. Beads from Ellen's necklace were scattered across the floor. Beside the bed, police found a torn pair of blue underwear identified as belonging to the victim. Additionally, there was a white bra and white underwear. There were no signs of struggle or scuffle around the body, except for the ligature marks on Ellen's neck. No other injuries were found on her body. The scene showed no signs of being ransacked or searched. The room was entirely intact, with no valuables or cash missing, leading police to rule out robbery as a motive. The bed sheets had various stains, including semen and saliva. Some semen stains appeared partially wiped, possibly existing from earlier. These traces could provide valuable information, but unfortunately, DNA technology at the time wasn't advanced enough, complicating the investigation process. Regarding the murder weapon, investigators noted that the jagged Z pattern on Ellen's neck matched the design of her underwear, and tests confirmed that the elastic from the underwear was used by the perpetrator to strangle Ellen to death. Additionally, fragments of human skin were found under Ellen's fingernails, suggesting she might have tried to resist or made contact with the killer in her final moments. Apart from this evidence, no other significant clues were found at the scene. Initially, police hypothesized that Ellen might have invited a friend or lover into the house while her husband, Edward, was away for the weekend. This theory was based on the open relationship between Ellen and her husband and the absence of forced entry signs at the scene. However, this hypothesis didn't explain why no foreign fingerprints were found, a major inconsistency. It would be nearly impossible for an outsider to completely erase all traces after the murder, especially given the numerous items in the house that could retain fingerprints. From the start, the case faced significant challenges, leading the police to focus on investigating relationships surrounding the victim. When Ellen's body was discovered, they quickly contacted Edward Sherman, who was still enjoying his vacation at sea with friends. Police requested that Edward and his friends sail to the nearest Coast Guard station for questioning. After a brief interrogation, his 4 friends were released, while Edward was asked to return for periodic questioning. During questioning, police asked about the skin fragments found under Ellen's nails. Initially, Edward appeared contemplative, but then quickly replied that he had asked Ellen to scratch his back the day before, which might have left the skin fragments under her nails. This answer surprised investigators as no one had mentioned the origin of the skin fragments. This was a suspicious detail that made the police question Edward's honesty. Additionally, investigators noticed 2 deep scratches on Edward's wrists. He explained that he had accidentally scraped his wrist on a fence at work. However, this answer was unconvincing, and it seemed like he was hiding something. Furthermore, Bill, a friend of Edward's, recalled that on their sea trip, despite the hot weather, everyone was wearing short clothes, yet Edward wore long sleeves and pants. When asked why, Edward replied that he was afraid of sunburn. Everyone was puzzled, but didn't question him further. Investigators realized he might have been intentionally hiding scratches on his arms. This friend also mentioned that the original plan was to leave at 10 p.m. on August 2nd, but Edward repeatedly urged the group to leave earlier, and they departed at 7:30 p.m. Around 7 p.m. that evening, Edward went to a friend's house to get ready for the trip. He borrowed his friend's landline phone to call his wife at home, even though the friend's daughter was waiting to use the phone to call her friends. Edward told his wife on the phone, "Honey, if you need anything, ask the neighbors for help. I'm about to set off." This call initially seemed casual, but became suspicious as the police later scrutinized it. During the sea trip, Edward continued calling home to express affection, an action that initially appeared caring, but, when viewed in the investigation's context, added another layer of suspicion. At this point, everyone might think Edward seemed like the ideal husband, but he actually led a double life. Edward frequently attended secret debauched parties with prostitutes. Ellen knew about this, but wasn't angry, as she'd also found her own way to fulfill her needs with other men. This arrangement kept their marriage stable, at least in the public's eyes. But their peace began to crumble when a new secret was revealed. Edward had a daughter with his former lover, Nancy Prescott, and their relationship had been ambiguous for years. In reality, Ellen was still Edward's legal wife. She couldn't accept this, so she chose to become pregnant to save their marriage, and demanded he end all ties with his lover. Ellen hoped Edward would calm down and return to her to build a happy life together. She was willing to overlook everything and forgive him, as long as he came back to her. But Nancy Prescott pushed Edward to make a choice, asking him to divorce Ellen, marry her, and raise their child together. If Edward refused, Nancy threatened to sever their relationship entirely. However, most of the assets, from the house and company to 2 cars, were owned by Ellen. If divorced, Edward would lose everything and be left nearly empty-handed. So, after careful consideration, Edward decided to return to Ellen, agree to break up with Nancy, and commit to financially supporting their child. Ellen felt happy because she had finally won the love triangle. She believed Edward had chosen family and was ready for a new life. But that peace didn't last long, and Ellen's nightmare had only just begun. According to neighbors, Edward frequently argued with and physically assaulted Ellen. 2 months before the crime, on Father's Day, their argument became intense, with Edward, in a fit of anger, repeatedly striking Ellen, leaving her with numerous bruises. After the Father's Day fight, Edward and Ellen's relationship seemed beyond repair. Ellen confided in her close friend that she had lost all patience and was determined to get a divorce. She no longer wanted to share assets, the house, or custody with Edward. Before the sea trip, Edward and Ellen's relationship seemed to have softened a bit. But perhaps that was just a facade. Police believed this might be the reason Edward decided to end everything in the most ruthless way. But for now, it was just a hypothesis. Returning to the phone call on August 2nd when Edward advised his wife before leaving for the sea. A new turning point in the investigation came when Jamie, an 8-year-old daughter of a friend named Bill, revealed critical information. When Edward was eager to call home, the girl was waiting to use the phone, but Edward interrupted, saying he had something very important to do. Feeling annoyed, Jamie decided to run to the next room. Out of curiosity, she quietly picked up the phone on the other line to listen what Edward was saying to his wife. What she heard shocked even the police. The other end was completely silent, with only a beep-beep tone, indicating the call was never connected. Edward was likely talking to himself, pretending the call took place to create an alibi. From Jamie's testimony, the police suspected that Edward's loving calls to his wife while on his trip were actually faked. This immediately made Edward the primary suspect in Ellen's case. However, Ellen's autopsy results poured cold water on the investigators at the time. The time of death was estimated to be between the night of August 2nd and 7 a.m. on August 4th, precisely when Edward was with his friends on the yacht. This rendered all previous suspect theories inaccurate. Edward temporarily escaped suspicion, but the police still felt uneasy about him. Why did he intentionally speak when no one was on the other line? When asked about this, Edward denied Bill's daughter's claim, saying she disliked him for interrupting her when she was waiting for the phone, so she made it up. Bill's daughter was only 8 years old, so her reliability wasn't high. She could have lied. The case gradually became a dead end, and all clues involving Edward seemed to fade, leaving investigators at an impasse. Before solving the case, police were shocked by Edward's actions right after his wife's death. He inherited his wife's entire estate, including the company, their shared house, and quickly splurged on a yacht and luxury car. Additionally, he publicly rekindled his relationship with Nancy, his old lover, shortly afterward. In everyone's eyes, Edward didn't seem to grieve his deceased wife. Instead, he lived even more lavishly, as if nothing had happened. At that time, despite numerous challenges, the police never gave up. The investigation into Ellen's death stretched over 2 years, during which police secretly gathered evidence, summoned dozens of witnesses, and attempted to trace all of Ellen's relationships. Finally, a woman named Lisa, Edward's neighbor, provided a crucial clue, leading to a significant turning point in the case. According to Lisa, when she watched the movie Blackout on TV, she recalled a detail she had forgotten to report to the police. On the morning of Friday, August 2nd, 1985, she happened to meet Edward in a video store. During a short conversation, Edward recommended Blackout to Lisa, a horror movie about a killer manipulating the crime scene by lowering the AC temperature to slow body decomposition. making it harder for forensics to determine the time of death. When the police heard this detail, they immediately realized Edward might have used the same tactic to cover up his crime. They decided to re-examine the entire scene, starting by interviewing the first person to enter the room where Ellen's body was found. Tom recalled that when he opened the bedroom door, a blast of cold air hit him, as the AC in the room was likely set to the lowest temperature. When he discovered Ellen lying motionless on the bed, he ran out in fear to call the police and forgot to close the door, causing the room temperature to rise quickly by the time the police arrived. Forensic experts noted that the extremely low AC temperature could slow decomposition, making Ellen's time of death harder to determine. Police began analyzing and carefully reviewing clues from 2 years earlier on the victim's body. To be certain, investigators conducted decomposition tests on real samples, examining them under regular and extremely low AC conditions. Through meticulous calculations and careful research, they confirmed Ellen had died shortly after Friday lunch, not on Friday night or Saturday morning as initially thought, and Edward had enough time to commit the crime before leaving with his friends that evening. These findings led the police to a new theory. Edward killed his wife on Friday afternoon, cleaned up the scene, set the air conditioner to an extremely low temperature to delay decomposition, then created an alibi by hurriedly leaving with his friends and continuously calling his wife. The police concluded that Edward had tried to create an illusion that his wife was still alive throughout his trip to cover up his crime. Every detail and timeline was part of his plan to create a perfect alibi. Edward thought his plan would succeed, but little did he know that a few boastful words and minor oversights would expose him, bringing a major breakthrough to the investigation and trapping him within the grasp of justice. Although the case happened in 1985, it wasn't until June 1990 that the police had enough evidence and legal grounds to bring Edward Sherman to trial. But Edward continuously denied all related charges, insisting he was innocent. Since all the evidence was circumstantial, charging Edward was a difficult task. To convince the court, the police reenacted the entire crime scene, detailing every action they believed Edward took to murder his wife. Edward had carefully planned everything beforehand, intending to evade guilt by taking cues from the movie Blackout. He thought his plan was flawless and was excited about the wealth he would inherit. This made him enthusiastically share the movie with his neighbor when they met. Based on the marks on Ellen's neck and her scratch marks, Edward had strangled his wife while she lay in bed. Since he had planned it from the start, he acted with brutality and coldness. During her struggle, Ellen scratched his arm, leaving deep marks, and broke the jewelry around her neck. Edward then stripped her and used her underwear to create fake ligature marks to mislead the police into thinking it was a sexual assault. He set the air conditioner to the lowest level to slow down body decomposition and extend the time of death, creating an alibi. He then exited through the window to make it appear as though he had left for the trip and that the victim was alone and had locked up. Edward then persuaded his friends to depart earlier and pretended to call his wife in front of everyone. In the days after the crime, Edward continued to maintain his worried facade, constantly calling his friend to check on the house, adding layers to his seemingly perfect plan. The police spent 6 hours in court reenacting this sequence, connecting all the indirect clues. The jury and judge saw a complete chain of evidence, based on witness testimonies and the forensic experts' sharp hypothesis. On November 4, 1991, the 7-week trial concluded as the jury unanimously found Edward guilty of first-degree murder, sentencing him to 50 years in prison. Edward continued to deny his guilt, but his stubbornness and deception couldn't save him from justice. After serving 3 years, he died suddenly in prison from a heart attack. The Edward Sherman case, though closed, left a profound sense of injustice. Without the 2 key witnesses who brought the truth to light, the perpetrator might still be leisurely vacationing on some yacht. The story of how Edward planned to kill his wife and used the air conditioner to conceal her time of death became a widespread topic of discussion. Many marveled at the cunning of his tricks and worried about how close he came to escaping justice. The media continuously covered and analyzed the case, sparking debates on whether the legal and investigative systems could improve to apprehend Edward sooner. Ultimately, the Edward Sherman case became a profound lesson for the community about the darker sides of human nature and a wake-up call on protecting those who suffer from domestic abuse. Ellen's family and friends hoped that justice had, in some measure, been served, allowing Ellen's soul to rest in peace. This concludes the video. Thank you for watching this thrilling story. If you found this video captivating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to catch more exciting crime stories. See you in the next video. March 1st, 2013. While the vibrant city of Hong Kong was bathed in the glow of city lights, with the hustle and bustle going on as usual, a mystery was quietly unfolding in the shadows of Tai Kok Tsui neighborhood. The couple, Chow Wing-ko and Xiao Yuni, suddenly disappeared without leaving any information. Their family and friends were deeply worried when they couldn't reach the couple. They started seeking help from the police. As time passed, questions started to arise. Could this be a targeted kidnapping? Or did they leave of their own accord? But if they left willingly, what could be the reason? The police began their investigation, but from the outset, they encountered countless obstacles, and the case seemed to hit a dead end. Do you think the expertise of the Hong Kong police will help answer the unanswered questions? Join us as we explore every chilling detail in the journey to solve this dramatic case. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any thrilling developments in the story. Hong Kong, a city that never sleeps, shines brightly, and is one of Asia's busiest financial hubs. The skyscrapers reflect sparkling lights on the waters of Victoria Harbor, creating a stunning scene. Tai Kok Tsui, where our story begins, is a wealthy residential area known for its high-end apartments intertwined with old neighborhoods, where affluent and reputable families choose to live. Beneath the modern facade of new buildings, Tai Kok Tsui still retains its ancient charm, with traditional cafes, small craft shops, and narrow alleys rich with the marks of time. It is a perfect blend of old-world beauty and modern development. The couple, Chow Wing-ko and Xiao Yuni, suddenly disappeared without leaving any information. Mr. Chow Wing-ko and Mrs. Xiao Yuni were a well-respected couple among Hong Kong's elite. They owned numerous valuable properties in the city and led a comfortable life with passive income from rental properties. After retirement, they enjoyed each day peacefully together, traveling freely and hosting tea gatherings with friends. With two sons, the Chow family was seen as a model of success and happiness. The eldest son, Chow Kai-ying, was a reserved, diligent, and serious man who always cared for the family. The younger son, Chow Kai-leong, was confident and outgoing, often accompanying his parents at family gatherings. As their lives reached the peak of happiness, why did they disappear? Many people, like myself, might wonder about this. At the police station, the two sons appeared visibly worried. They reported that their parents, Mr. Chow Wing-ko, 65 years old, and Mrs. Xiao Yuni, 62 years old, had mysteriously disappeared after leaving their home 5 days ago. Chow Kai-ying tried to stay calm, saying, "We've tried everything we could, calling, contacting friends, and even searching all the places our parents usually visit. But there's no sign of them. We hope the police can help us find them as soon as possible." The police received the information and noted that the 5 days without contact suggested a high possibility of foul play, so they immediately prepared a search plan. During the interview, Chow Kai-leong provided additional important information. He mentioned that the last time he saw his parents was on March 2nd, when the three of them went to the IFC Mall in Mongkok to eat. During dinner, Mr. Chow Wing-ko and Mrs. Xiao Yuni mentioned that they planned to go to the mainland for 2 days. They reminded Kai-leong of this, but didn't specify the exact location. Afterward, his parents bid him farewell and went shopping for the trip. Since then, he hadn't seen them again. 2 days later, when they hadn't returned, Kai-leong began to feel uneasy. He tried calling them repeatedly, but their phones were turned off, leaving him with no way to reach them. When his brother, Chow Kai-ying, returned home from work, he, too, was unable to reach their parents. Kai-ying suggested that his younger brother call every relative and friend whom their parents might have met in the mainland, hoping someone knew where they were. However, after inquiring with everyone from friends to relatives, no one knew the whereabouts of Mr. Chao Wing-ko and Mrs. Xiao Yueni. The two brothers began to feel increasingly anxious. They decided to thoroughly check their parents' belongings and quickly discovered a strange detail. Their parents' passports and home return permits were still in the drawer. This discovery startled the brothers. Without the home return permits, their parents couldn't have entered the mainland, meaning they had never left Hong Kong, as they claimed. Both brothers called relatives in Shenzhen, a place where their parents owned property and often visited. However, family members there confirmed that they hadn't seen them, which only heightened the brothers' growing worry. By March 7th, after days of worry and no leads, the two brothers decided to visit the Western District Police Station to seek help from the police to locate their parents. The Hong Kong police immediately sprang into action, starting an investigation based on the information provided by Chow Kai-ying and Chow Kai-leong. They recorded the last appearance of Mr. Chao Wing-ko, wearing a dark blue vest, long-sleeve shirt, jeans, and rimless glasses, while Mrs. Xiao Yueni wore a light gray shirt and jeans. Both carried simple crossbody bags. Because Kai Leong reported that his parents intended to travel to the mainland, the police launched a large-scale search at train stations, ferry terminals, and airports. They also monitored the route from the Chow's home to the IFC Mall in Mongkok. Police questioned nearby shops, residents, and passers-by in the area, extracting footage from every camera around, hoping someone had seen or recognized the couple. Meanwhile, Kai Ying and Kai Leong, along with friends, spread out across nearby streets, posting flyers with pictures and information about their parents. On March 9th, Kai Ying created a Facebook page called Missing Parents, where he detailed his parents' physical characteristics and appealed to the public for help. He frequently updated information on the disappearance and possible places his parents could have visited, drawing attention and hoping for assistance from social media users. Kai Leong also accepted interviews from the media to spread information about the disappearance. He spoke about his family's situation, ruling out the possibility of kidnapping, and described their appearance and clothing before they vanished. Nevertheless, the brothers received no valuable information, which only heightened their anxiety. On the police side, they continued a deeper investigation and discovered that the Chows owned several valuable properties, and the immigration records showed no travel entries or exits. This confirmed that the couple had not left Hong Kong recently. Initially, the police hypothesized that this could be a kidnapping for ransom, but after a week with no ransom calls to family or relatives, the kidnapping theory was quickly dismissed. If the Chows hadn't traveled or been kidnapped, where could they have gone? Police considered the possibility that the couple had gone hiking, an activity they loved. But one puzzling aspect was their ordinary attire when they disappeared, which didn't resemble hiking clothes. Kai Leong also emphasized a crucial detail. His mother, Xiao Yueni, was very meticulous. If she planned to go far, she would certainly inform her sons of her itinerary in detail. All signs pointed to the likelihood that they met with misfortune. However, all inferences up to this point did not directly lead to the couple's whereabouts. As time passed, news of the disappearance garnered more public attention. News outlets shared the bizarre and frightening story widely. The video interviews with Chow Kai Leong became a hot topic discussion. At this point, some experienced officers watching the news noticed peculiar expressions on Kai Leong's face. Something in his eyes and demeanor struck them as strange. Here are a few valuable observations. First observation: subtle glance and tension when mentioning his parents leaving home. When asked about the last day he saw his parents and their intended destination, he briefly glanced to the left and looked uneasy. Kai Leong's eyes showed tension when recalling this detail, as if afraid something might be revealed. A quick glance is a typical sign of stress and avoidance, usually seen when someone is hiding important information. Kai Leong's clear anxiety led the police to suspect he knew more than he was saying about his parents' disappearance. Second observation: hesitation and change in expression when mentioning the timeline. When police probed further about the last time he saw his parents and the schedule afterward, Kai Leong's expression subtly changed. He blinked frequently and hesitated, trying to respond calmly, but taking extra time to organize his words. These are signs of tension, especially when someone is trying to recall or assemble a fabricated story. This inconsistency and stress led police to suspect that Kai Leong might be hiding or fabricating something. Third observation: avoiding eye contact and change in tone when discussing his parents' assets. When the police asked about Mr. and Mrs. Chow's assets and whether anyone else knew about them, Kai Leong immediately avoided eye contact. He looked down at the table, his voice grew softer and stilted, as if eager to change the topic quickly. This suggested guilt or anxiety, especially when discussing a sensitive topic like assets. The police realized that the assets could be a possible motive behind the Chow's disappearance. In reality, the Hong Kong police had long suspected Kai Leong, and observing his behavioral cues only reinforced these suspicions. When reviewing the cameras at IFC Mall, where Chow Kai Leong claimed to have last seen his parents, the police realized there was no footage of the three of them throughout the day. Investigators began to think Kai Leong may have orchestrated everything. If no one had seen Mr. and Mrs. Chow, and there was no sign they had left Hong Kong, it was likely he fabricated a story to cover something far more sinister. The police immediately summoned Kai Leong for further questioning. While waiting for the officers to enter the room, he fixated on his phone. At that moment, Kai Leong sent an unexpected message to the group chat, HK Tekken. "I can't take it anymore. All they want is for me to become what they expect." A friend in the group chat replied, thinking he was venting frustration toward his parents. But Kai Leong continued with a chilling confession. "They've always controlled my life, making me live like a prisoner. I've freed myself from them." When group members started feeling something unusual, Kai Leong continued, "That day, I invited them to the new apartment to prepare everything. When they walked in, I killed them." His messages continued, describing the horrifying scene in the apartment. "I attacked my father from behind. When he fell, all my tension disappeared. No more control, no more obstacles. For me, everything is over now. I'm going to jail. Goodbye, everyone." Kai Leong's confession left the group chat in stunned silence. One friend, trembling, called the police, unable to believe this was true. Meanwhile, Kai Leong's last chilling message appeared. "My parents are in the past now. This is true. Not a joke. I just want to be reborn, free from all shackles." Right after sending the messages, Kai Leong confessed everything to the police, also revealing his accomplice and the location where he hid his parents' bodies. When Kai Leong's profile was reviewed, a bleak picture of his childhood and life gradually emerged, helping to explain the motive behind this gruesome crime. Chow Kai Leong, born on June 7, 1983, in Hong Kong, according to friends, seemed to have lived in his own world since he was young. He had a lonely childhood, molded by his parents' strict expectations. They always expected him to become a perfect person, to inherit their immense fortune. In elementary school, Chow was forced to learn piano as his parents wished. Even though he disliked it, they never cared about his feelings. They only saw what they wanted, setting strict standards that fueled resentment within Chow. By middle school, Chow became isolated, unable to integrate with his peers. His academic performance declined due to emotional instability, and his introversion grew as he failed the Hong Kong Certificate of Education examination. For a family that valued honor, this was an unforgivable disgrace. His parents decided to send Chow to study in Australia, hoping to reform him. But it was there that he endured the greatest psychological traumas. During his time in Australia, Chow faced discrimination and bullying, even being beaten by groups of young men. Each time he was insulted, he felt alone and humiliated, unable to confide in anyone. When he returned to Hong Kong in 2003, Chow had become a completely different person. He shared neither feelings nor emotions with anyone, including old friends. Chow lived reclusively, his heart full of resentment, especially towards his parents. He sought solace through social media, where he happened to meet and become close friends with Tsai Chin-Kei. The investigation also revealed that Tsai Chin-Kei, Chow's accomplice, had an equally complex and dark past. Tsai once had a serious relationship, but when he went to New Zealand, he met a woman who deceived him out of all his money. After that, Tsai's life began to fall apart. Returning to Hong Kong in 2010, Tsai faced despair and attempted suicide 3 times in horrifying ways, burning charcoal, drinking rat poison, and even swallowing mercury. But his sister discovered him in time and saved his life. Although he was saved, Tsai was no longer himself. He suffered brain damage, memory loss, and decreased ability to process information. His mind became unstable, easily influenced, and a sense of confusion consumed his spirit. 2 lives marked by trauma and disappointment met, forming a toxic bond. Dark, negative thoughts slowly consumed them. In Chow's confession, he claimed that his parents had destroyed his life from the beginning, imposing ambitions on him that he never wanted. In Tsai, he found someone who shared his feelings, a psychologically unstable person willing to join him in anything. With a meticulously prepared plan, Chow Kai Leong invited his parents to visit his new apartment, which was actually his accomplice, Sei Chun Kei's apartment. Mr. and Mrs. Chow believed it to be a simple house visit and suspected nothing. When they entered the apartment, they were still cheerful, chatting. But as the door closed, the atmosphere quickly changed. Behind the door, a heavy hammer had been prepared. In a moment they never anticipated, Chow Kai Leong and Sei Chun Kei attacked. The hammer struck down on Mr. and Mrs. Chow. Blow after brutal blow. They only managed to raise their hands in absolute horror, but quickly succumbed to the fatal injuries. Kai Leong carried out the attack directly, while Chun Kei played the role of an assistant. The attack happened quickly, leaving no chance for either victim to scream for help. With no resistance left, the apartment was silent, and the metallic smell of blood filled the air. After Chow Kai Leong's confession, the police immediately arrested Sei Chun Kei based on his testimony. They searched his residence at 38 Phuc Chok, Tai Kok Tsui, and what they found there exceeded all imagination. In Sei Chun Kei's apartment, police were stunned by the horrific scene, with blood stains splattered from the doorway and smeared throughout. In 2 refrigerators in the kitchen, they found dismembered body parts and the preserved organs of Mr. and Mrs. Chow, which had been salted to prevent decomposition. Further chilling details emerged as police searched the bedroom. On the bed, a large kitchen knife lay next to a blood-stained wooden cutting board, the tools that Sei Chun Kei and Kai Leong had used to dismember the victims. Police found even more, numerous plastic containers filled with char siu roast pork scattered in the fridge and on the table. Perhaps many would wonder why there were so many containers of char siu. But when they pieced the body parts together, some were missing. You understand what I mean, don't you? Certainly, we are all horrified. Initially, the killers planned to use 2 refrigerators to store the bodies, but space was insufficient. So Chow and Sei Chun Kei chose to deal with the remainder by turning parts of the bodies into grotesque containers of char siu, and some of the meat even showed signs of having been eaten. Not stopping there, the police found a notebook filled with disturbing notes. This notebook revealed that since 2012, Kai Leong and Sei Chun Kei had been planning to carry out murders. The chilling notes detailed methods for hiding and disposing of victims, showcasing both of their twisted obsessions and distorted mental states. The apartment at 38 Phuc Chok, once an ordinary place, had transformed into one of the most horrifying crime scenes, with every corner stained by unimaginable cruelty. Police realized this was not just a simple murder case, but the peak of a brutal plan carried out by individuals who had lost all humanity. On March 15, Hong Kong police officially arrested Chow Kai Leong and his accomplice, Sei Chun Kei, following thorough investigations and chilling confessions. This horrifying case quickly became the focal point of media and public attention, shocking the entire city of Hong Kong. At a subsequent press conference, the Hong Kong police representative, standing before a sea of cameras, confirmed the 2 suspects plotted together, lured and killed the victims on March 1st. They both attacked the victims in a brutal manner, and according to Chow's confession, Sei Chun Kei was responsible for dismembering the bodies. The trial was promptly organized, attracting widespread public attention. Every detail of the murder plot, dismemberment, and the gruesome acts of the 2 defendants turned the trial into an intense and haunting experience. Here, Chow Kai Leong showed no remorse but calmly recounted his crimes with a detached demeanor. Chow admitted that he and Sei Chun Kei meticulously planned, prepared tools, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. With a cold tone, he described the killing process, claiming that it was a release for him from the pressures his parents had imposed on him all his life. Se-chun-kei, Chow's accomplice, in a weakened state and with an unstable mind, confirmed Chow's testimony. He admitted to participating, but emphasized that he had only followed Chow's plan, who orchestrated and led all the actions. When the evidence was presented, the courtroom fell into an eerie silence. Crime scene photos showing the dismembered bodies, char siu containers holding parts of the victims, and the tools used for the crime were displayed as clear evidence of the horrific act. The prosecutor presented a strong case, accusing Chow and Se-chun-kei of being dangerous individuals with a murder plan devoid of conscience or family bonds. Prosecutors argued that this brutal crime was unforgivable and demanded the highest sentence to protect societal safety. Finally, after many days of trial, the court announced Chow Kai-leong is sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. He is an extremely dangerous individual, a skilled actor capable of lying without blinking, showing no sign of remorse whatsoever. As for Se-chun-kei, the court recognized him as an accomplice who was psychologically manipulated, with diminished memory and cognitive abilities. Thus, Se-chun-kei was sentenced to only 1 year in prison. The trial concluded in a heavy atmosphere, serving as a cautionary tale for society about the cruelty that can lurk within seemingly ordinary people. When Chow was led away, his face showed no fear or remorse, but only a faint smile. It was the smile of a man who had freed himself. Someone who no longer cared about conscience or the responsibilities of the life that had nurtured him. This haunting trial left an indelible scar in the hearts of Hong Kong's people, and the case of Chow Kai-leong will forever remain a symbol of the corruption and decay of the human soul. This concludes the video. Thank you for following this thrilling story. If you found this video captivating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any other intriguing crime stories. See you in the next video. On the night of July 22nd, 1991, in the city of Eastville, as everyone was drifting into a deep sleep, 2 patrolling police officers unexpectedly encountered a man running toward them in panic, pleading for help. He was unclothed, with handcuffs still on his wrist, and his body bore several clearly visible bruises.
"Please help me. He was going to kill me."
His voice trembled, and his eyes showed utter terror. Sensing something was wrong, the police officers immediately offered assistance and followed the man's directions. And from there, they unintentionally uncovered a horrifying secret about a killer whose name would send shivers down America's spine. This criminal didn't just kill like usual, he did things none of us could ever imagine. So what exactly did this man go through? Was his escape just luck, or did the killer deliberately release his prey for the thrill of the hunt? Subscribe to our channel to explore this story with us right after this. Eastville, the setting of the incident, a city known for its ancient streets intertwined with modern skyscrapers. It is densely populated and serves as an important economic center in the region. This place brings together people from all walks of life, and cases of people disappearing without a trace frequently occur. It seems the bustling, prosperous facade of Eastville conceals dark secrets beneath. The crime serves as a terrifying warning, making the locals anxious and fearful of what might lurk in the shadows of their city. Returning to the incident, at first, when the 2 officers saw the man, they thought he might be a pervert fleeing from somewhere. They quickly approached, cautiously restrained him, and began questioning. But when they saw him stammering, trembling, and pleading out of sheer fear, they decided to look into it further. The man introduced himself as Tracy Edwards. He had just escaped from the apartment of a strange man. According to Tracy, that evening, he went to a familiar bar with 2 friends. At the bar, they met a white, gay man who was handsome and appeared generous. He suggested that Tracy's group come to his apartment for drinks and to take some provocative photos, offering each of them $100. The group initially hesitated, but in the end, only Tracy agreed. Upon entering the apartment, Tracy immediately sensed a cold, eerie atmosphere. The apartment was small but messy, filled with an unpleasant stench that made him feel something was wrong. He also noticed several bottles of hydrochloric acid on the living room floor, a chemical rarely found in an ordinary apartment. While Tracy was still curious about the place, the strange man turned on the TV and invited him to watch a horror movie. Tracy was somewhat uneasy, but they continued talking. Then, suddenly, the man pulled out a pair of handcuffs and said he wanted to try a fun game. With an easygoing personality, Tracy agreed and let the man handcuff one of his wrists, as he had encountered partners with a preference for violence in same-sex relationships before. They both walked into the bedroom, where the stench grew even stronger. In the corner of the room, Tracy saw a blue plastic container, and it seemed the smell originated from there. Despite feeling uneasy, he tried to stay calm and lay on the bed as instructed. While lying on the bed, the man suddenly pulled out a gleaming knife, flashed a strange smile, and told him to take off all his clothes. At this moment, Tracy sensed imminent danger, but with one hand handcuffed, he could barely escape, so he complied. Pretending to stay calm, Tracy asked the man to remove the handcuffs, explaining that he would cooperate better if he was free. After considering for a moment, the man seemed to believe in Tracy's cooperation, relaxed his guard, and set the knife down on the bed. He then began undressing himself. Tracy gradually realized the extreme danger posed by this man. At the peak of the encounter, the man leaned close to him, rested his head on Tracy's chest, and whispered, "Your heart is beating so fast. I'll eat this heart." These horrifying words shook Tracy, but he tried to hide his fear, laughing it off as if everything was fine. Tracy kept talking to the man to distract him, all while sweating as he thought of an escape plan. He noticed the main door wasn't locked, only slightly closed. When the man let his guard down, Tracy abruptly shoved him away. Then he bolted toward the apartment door, breaking the latch in his rush, not daring to look back, knowing every step was a chance to survive. Tracy escaped the apartment complex. Although he had no clothes on, he frantically searched for help until he encountered two police officers. After hearing Tracy's story, the officers were horrified. They decided to accompany him back to apartment 213 on the second floor of the complex. Upon arrival, they knocked, and a white man with a calm demeanor opened the door. The officers asked him to explain Tracy's accusations. The man admitted to handcuffing Tracy but explained that the key was in the bedroom. Noticing the man's calm, somewhat strange demeanor, along with the suspicious details Tracy had mentioned, the two officers exchanged glances and cautiously stepped inside the apartment. The apartment was dimly lit, with a heavy, indescribable odor lingering, sharp and stifling. One officer decided to check the bedroom for the key, as the man had claimed, while the other remained, eyes fixed on him. When the officer opened the drawer next to the bed, he froze. A stack of photos lay inside. His professional instincts told him they could be photos of human body parts. Within moments, he confirmed the images were real. Without needing any further evidence, the officer drew his gun and subdued the man in front of him, signaling his partner to call for additional support immediately. When the backup team arrived, the two officers continued searching the apartment while the man was already restrained. They opened the refrigerator in the living room and were instantly chilled to the bone. Inside was a freshly severed head, its eyes wide open as if still alive. It was the head of an African-American man. The officers looked at the apartment's owner in shock, but he showed almost no reaction. He simply said, "I did all of that. I deserve to die. Please arrest me." His cold admission intensified the tense, haunting atmosphere. The police force began to seal off the entire apartment, and a more thorough search was initiated. On the stove they found some cooked meat. Besides the head in the refrigerator, they also found multiple internal organs and several parts of an arm, all carefully preserved. The sight surpassed every horror the officers had ever encountered in their lives. Continuing their search, they found a total of 11 skulls. There were 4 in the living room and 7 more in the bedroom. Some were bleached, while others were painted in strange colors, as if they were part of a grotesque collection on display. Even more frightening, in the bedroom, there was a blue plastic container filled with acid. Upon inspection, they found dismembered human body parts piled inside the container. Additionally, the police found 2 complete human skeletons, a pair of severed hands, and male genitalia, all carefully stored. They continued to open plastic bags in the apartment and discovered a total of 80 horrifying photos, documenting the entire dismemberment process of the victims. The crime scene was so horrific that a forensic investigator described the apartment as more of a crime museum than an actual crime scene. The identity of the man was quickly confirmed. His name was Jeffrey Dahmer, 31 years old, born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee. His father was Lionel Dahmer, and his mother was Joyce Dahmer. Jeffrey had been a lively and cheerful child. However, after a hernia surgery at the age of 4, everything seemed to change. The prolonged pain and recovery caused Jeffrey to become quiet and withdrawn from society. When Jeffrey was 6, his younger brother was born, and the Dahmer family began moving frequently. The birth of his brother made Jeffrey even more reclusive. He felt his parents were biased and that his brother had taken all their love. With each move, he felt more isolated in unfamiliar environments, which made Jeffrey feel weary. From here, he accidentally found a new source of joy: animal bones. Discovering animal skeletons left in the nearby woods, he became fascinated by studying their structures. Jeffrey collected insect remains and skulls of small animals, carefully preserving them in jars of formaldehyde. He also expressed his passion by killing small animals around the house and collecting their bones as trophies. During his teenage years, Jeffrey began to show increasingly isolated behavior. Without friends, he was immersed in his own world. By the age of 14, he started having dark urges involving corpses and murder. This coincided with his parents' turbulent divorce, with constant arguments making Jeffrey lose the sense of security he once felt at home. At 14, he started drinking alcohol. As he grew older, his alcohol consumption increased beyond control. Long drinking binges left Jeffrey lost, leading him to drop out after just 1 semester at Ohio State University. Jeffrey's twisted nature and distorted psyche grew day by day, and he was only waiting for an opportunity to satisfy his desires. In June 1978, Jeffrey was driving on a small, deserted road when he spotted a shirtless young man walking along the side of the road. Mesmerized by the man's appearance and muscles, Jeffrey slowly pulled up beside him and asked if he needed a ride. The young man gladly got in, unaware that this would be his final journey. After a brief conversation, Jeffrey learned that the young man was named Stephen Hicks, 18, from Ohio, and that he was on his way to a rock concert at Chippewa Lake Park. At that moment, Jeffrey devised a plan and invited Stephen to his home for a few drinks before taking him to the concert. Stephen, without any suspicion, agreed to the invitation. Once at Jeffrey's home, they began drinking and talking. Stephen told Jeffrey about the beautiful women he knew, but Jeffrey showed little interest. His attention was solely on Stephen. Jeffrey desperately wanted to keep Stephen all to himself, but understood that if he suggested staying, Stephen would certainly refuse. After talking for a while, Stephen stood up, excusing himself to leave in time for the concert. Jeffrey tried to convince Stephen to stay, but Stephen declined. Slightly intoxicated, as Stephen staggered to his feet, Jeffrey suddenly grabbed a heavy dumbbell nearby and struck Stephen hard on the head. Stephen was dazed, unable to react, and collapsed to the ground. Wasting no time, Jeffrey quickly strangled him until he stopped breathing. After killing Stephen, Jeffrey remained completely calm and showed no fear. Instead, he felt a thrill at having captured his prey. He removed the victim's clothes and began performing disturbing acts with the corpse. The next day, with morbid curiosity, Jeffrey continued exploring Stephen's body in his basement, burying the remaining parts in the backyard. However, a few weeks later, noticing children playing near the burial site, Jeffrey feared being discovered. He decided to dig up Stephen's remains, dissolve the flesh in acid, and crush the bones into powder with a hammer, scattering them throughout the nearby woods. What once was Stephen Hicks was now just a dark secret Jeffrey kept hidden in his heart. In July 1978, Jeffrey's father returned home, only to find his son constantly drunk. Disappointed, Lionel used his connections to enroll Jeffrey at Ohio State University, one of the region's top universities. But Jeffrey showed no interest in studying. He neglected classes and drowned himself in alcohol. Lionel eventually visited Jeffrey at school and found his dorm filled with alcohol. Finally, Jeffrey dropped out after only 3 months. Determined not to give up on his son, Lionel continued trying to help him, and pushed Jeffrey into the military, hoping he would find discipline and a future. In January 1979, Jeffrey enlisted in the U.S. Army as a medic, but his drinking habits didn't subside. By early 1981, Jeffrey was discharged due to repeated violations of unit rules. He returned to Ohio. The Dahmer family quickly realized his condition had deteriorated to an uncontrollable state. Jeffrey's parents decided to send him to live with his grandmother in West Allis, a suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, hoping that under her love, he could improve himself and separate from the vices he was entangled in. At his grandmother's house, Jeffrey had a fresh start. She loved him dearly, trying to help him quit drinking and taking him to church every week. Jeffrey also took on newspaper delivery work to keep himself busy. However, his grandmother's efforts were merely a temporary solution for a mind filled with darkness, waiting to erupt. After a short time, he was once again involved in allegations related to children and was subsequently fired. By January 1985, Jeffrey was hired as a bartender at a bar. There, he was captivated by the handsome, charming male patrons. This reignited his twisted desires. Jeffrey gradually began frequenting gay venues where he could freely approach men he was interested in without attracting much attention. Always seeking new thrills in life, Jeffrey once secretly stole a male mannequin from a store, brought it home, and hid it in his closet to use as his partner. However, this behavior did not escape his grandmother's notice. Upon discovering it, she demanded he immediately get rid of the mannequin and firmly forbade him from engaging in such actions. Despite this, every night, Jeffrey secretly brought home male friends he met at the bar. After bringing them to his room, he would secretly slip sleeping pills into their drinks, waiting for them to fall completely unconscious before engaging in intimate acts. This way, he could fully control his partners without encountering any resistance. However, the thrill and satisfaction from this control only lasted for a while. Jeffrey soon began craving a more intense sense of possession. A bizarre thought crossed his mind when he read an article about the death of a young man, prompting Jeffrey to secretly take a shovel to the cemetery late at night, intending to dig up a grave and possess the corpse. But after a few shovel strikes, he realized the ground was too hard, making his insane plan impossible to carry out. Reluctantly, Jeffrey had to abandon the idea. By September 1985, Jeffrey was arrested again for indecent behavior in public. This incident not only damaged his image further, but also resulted in a 1-year probation as a final warning from the law. However, despite being under supervision, his dark thoughts never ceased. In November 1987, on a misty evening, Jeffrey happened to meet Stephen Tuomi at a bar. Stephen, a young man from Michigan, had no idea this encounter would lead him into an inescapable nightmare. Jeffrey was captivated by Stephen's dashing appearance, using money and sweet talk to persuade him to come to a hotel with him. At the hotel, Jeffrey slipped sedatives into Stephen's drink, waiting until he was completely unconscious. Jeffrey then acted out his fantasies of absolute control, but this time, it seemed he had gone a bit too far. The next morning, Stephen's body was cold and stiff, his chest covered in bruises and blood seeping from the corners of his mouth. Jeffrey showed no signs of panic, as this was not his first time. He bought a large suitcase, carefully placing Stephen's body inside, making sure no one would suspect anything. Afterward, he took Stephen's body back to his grandmother's house, tightly wrapping it in plastic to prevent any odor from escaping. A week later, he secretly went down to the basement late at night, dismembering Stephen's body into small pieces, placing them in plastic bags, dissolving the flesh in acid, and using a hammer to crush the bones until they were fragmented. His cold-blooded composure with each hammer strike revealed his intent to maintain complete control over everything. He disposed of all body parts, but kept the head as a trophy. He soaked it in Soilex, a high-alkaline industrial cleaning solution mixed with bleach. Then he cooked it and stripped off the decomposed flesh. However, the skull became brittle and didn't meet his expectations, so he decided to smash it. Jeffrey realized that Soilex was the ideal solution for disposing of bodies without producing an overwhelming stench. From then on, he began developing a process for disposing of future victims. Jeffrey did more than just dispose of bodies. He kept bones or other parts as souvenirs. His bloodlust had now transformed into a sick, uncontrollable craving. 2 months later, on January 16, 1988, Jeffrey Dahmer found a new target at a familiar bar. This man, named James Doxtator, was a 14-year-old from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Jeffrey approached him with an offer to pose for photographs in exchange for $50. Unable to resist the promised money, James agreed to go with Dahmer to his apartment. At the apartment, Jeffrey used his usual tactic, spiking the drink, waiting for the victim to pass out, then strangling him to death, followed by assaulting the body. He dismembered it and kept the head, bleaching the bones to preserve them as a macabre trophy. Over time, he continued using similar methods to lure and kill many other victims within the gay community. His collection grew increasingly diverse. Some skulls were even painted in garish, haunting colors. By April 1988, Jeffrey found another target. He brought this gay man home, preparing to act as he had done before. However, just as he was about to begin, a voice called from outside the door. "Jeffrey, are you all right?" It was his grandmother's voice. Jeffrey was startled, hesitated, and had to abandon his intent to kill. In a panic, he threw the half-conscious man out onto the street. To avoid suspicion, he even carefully escorted the man to the hospital afterward. After this incident, Jeffrey's grandmother noticed a foul odor emanating from his room, and that strange visitors were frequently coming late at night. Unable to tolerate it any longer, she decided to evict Jeffrey from her home. Forced to leave his place of residence, Jeffrey rented a small apartment at 924 North 25th Street, apartment 213, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. By September 1988, Jeffrey was accused of luring a 13-year-old boy into his apartment with malicious intent. The boy managed to escape and immediately reported Jeffrey to the police. This time, Jeffrey was arrested. When subjected to psychological evaluation, experts confirmed that he exhibited signs of schizoid and impulsive personality disorders, along with limited trust in others and extreme tendencies toward introversion. By January 1989, after a tense trial process, Jeffrey Dahmer was convicted of second-degree assault and sentenced to 1 year in prison with 5 years of probation. However, this sentence was not enforced until May 1989, and during his temporary detention, Jeffrey was allowed a few days of release for Easter. Returning home in March, he only seemed stable for a short while before delving further into crime. On March 25, 1989, less than a week after his temporary release, Jeffrey struck again. This time, he targeted a 24-year-old biracial model named Anthony Sears from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He invited the victim home and repeated his familiar procedure. 2 months later, on May 23, 1989, Jeffrey was formally sentenced to prison, with probation time to follow upon release. However, due to good behavior, he was released after just 2 months. In the span of 2 years, he killed 12 people undetected. Using the pretext of paying for photos, he lured victims home, committed his crimes, and preserved their skulls as sick trophies. He even attempted to use a microwave to dry out skulls, but an explosion forced him to find another method. Over time, Jeffrey went beyond strangling and began experimenting with chemicals. He drilled a hole into his victims' skulls, injecting acid or boiling water, attempting to turn them into living zombies with weak consciousness, incapable of resistance. This led him to believe he could fully control his victims, until one incident changed everything. On May 26, 1991, Jeffrey invited a newly immigrated 14-year-old boy named Konorak Synthesomphone to his apartment. After taking photographs, Jeffrey followed his usual process by sedating and drilling a hole into the boy's skull, injecting acid. After the boy lost consciousness, Jeffrey dragged him into the bedroom, where another body was yet to fully decompose. That night, Jeffrey went out drinking. Upon returning early in the morning, he was shocked to find Konorak naked and terrified, speaking with 3 women downstairs. The boy had managed to escape. Jeffrey quickly pretended to be the boy's boyfriend, put his arm around him, and told the women that this was his friend. However, they were suspicious and called the police. When the police arrived, Jeffrey remained calm, explaining that the boy was his 19-year-old boyfriend who had run outside inebriated. Although the 3 women were suspicious due to the boy's injuries and frightened expression, the police believed Jeffrey's story. He also showed the police private photos of himself and the boy. Due to the sensitive nature of the situation, the police believed him, even though the boy continued pleading for help. The boy might have survived, but due to cases involving people of color, the police were rather dismissive, as racial discrimination was still common at the time. The police asked the three women to leave, and the boy was subsequently forced by Jeffrey to return to the apartment. As expected, the boy's fate was sealed once he returned. The police presence had made Jeffrey both angry and fearful, especially with Konorak nearly escaping. Feeling threatened, he decided to inject another dose of acid into Konorak's skull, causing the boy immense pain before he passed away. For 2 years living in this apartment, Jeffrey continued to sink deeper into the horrors of his actions. The stench from apartment 213 increasingly caused complaints from neighbors. In such cases, he often explained it away by claiming his refrigerator was broken, so no one suspected anything further. In total, Jeffrey killed 17 people, including many teenagers and young men. The youngest victim was 14 and the oldest 36. Most of them were African American, Asian, and immigrants, making Dahmer's case one of the most shocking and haunting crime sprees. He perfected a sick preservation system for his victims' body parts. Skulls and bones, after bleaching, would be retained to form a grotesque collection in his apartment. Victims' hearts and livers were carefully preserved in his refrigerator. Jeffrey continued to satisfy his urges, repeatedly committing his crimes without leaving any clear traces for the police. However, as the saying goes, the more one does something wrong, the more likely they are to be caught. As in the beginning of this video, Tracy directly accused him, and this time, Jeffrey would face the punishment he deserved. At trial, Jeffrey faced the judges and the victims' families. His testimony threw the entire courtroom into a nightmare. Initially, when interrogated, he confessed to every crime, casually recounting his horrifying actions. However, during the trial, Jeffrey suddenly changed his testimony. He tried to plead insanity, claiming that his actions were due to mental instability and that he couldn't control himself during the crimes. Nonetheless, the prosecutor countered with strong evidence and expert testimony, proving Jeffrey was fully aware and in control of his actions. After days of debate, the trial concluded. The judge sentenced Jeffrey to 15 consecutive life sentences, equivalent to 957 years in prison, with no possibility of parole. This heavy sentence caused an uproar in the courtroom. Jeffrey sat motionless, expressionless, his gaze empty and chilling, sending shivers down the spectators. As Jeffrey was led out of the court, cries of anger and resentment from the victims' families echoed through the room. The trial ended, leaving an indelible mark on judicial history. Jeffrey would remain imprisoned forever, never escaping the severe punishment for his horrific crimes. This is the end of the video. Thank you for watching this intriguing story. If you found this video captivating, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss more thrilling crime stories. See you in the next videos.